Welcome back to our studio. Just as promised, we're coming back with an interview about the upcoming U.S. presidential election. With the U.S. presidential election less than a week away, the eyes of the world are watching closely as the upcoming vote will decide more than just the future of the U.S. As both campaigns intensify on their final stretch, the world, as we know, might change overnight. Talking about potential political landscapes and scenarios, I'm joined by Tomasz Obremski, resident fellow at the Casimir Pulaski Foundation. Thank you so much for joining me this morning here in the studio.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So we are only days away from the U.S. presidential election. When it comes to our region, what's at stake?
A lot. For sure, everybody's watching and everybody's preparing. President Zelensky recently, last week, had this tour around Europe proposing his peace plan, waiting for the results of the presidential elections. But it's not only our region. I would say that even more people in Beijing, in Asia, in Tel Aviv, in Israel are watching, because this is going to be way more decisive for them rather than for Europe. Here, those personal relations with President Trump will be very important. Donald Trump has argued that he's going to finish the war overnight. He didn't say how. It might turn well for Ukraine, it may turn badly. So it is considered that the election of President Harris is more safe bet, let's say.
As we're looking at the final days, we saw Mr. Trump take a stage at Madison Square Garden in New York. We saw Miss Harris actually take the stage in Houston, Texas as well, alongside Beyonce and Kelly Rowland. But as we're looking at their campaigns, what would you say are the strongest and the weakest parts of their campaign as of now, only a few days away?
The strongest part of Donald Trump's campaign is that he's basically everywhere. You open your fridge and you see Donald Trump. He's giving the interviews to everybody, including podcasts, and I think this is something new. Yeah, Joe Rogan, in like 2 days, over 35 million views. We can say that, okay, Kamala Harris gave a view to Fox News, but it was like 2 weeks ago, and how many people did actually see that?
There was an interview with Mr. Cooper for CNN as well.
There was an interview with Mr. Cooper, but I think these elections in 2016, we were very much amazed how Donald Trump did well in the social media. But now it's going to be remembered how well he did with the new media, with podcasts. And I think it's also a good lesson for Polish presidential elections, that candidates should not only be focused on TV, so warning signs to TVP World, but also to the YouTube channels, to the podcasters that really have amazing outreach. And he constantly speaks. It's Trump every day, everywhere, whereas Harris does not really give that many interviews, does not really position herself on the most crucial issues. And it seems that she's not properly motivating Democratic electorate, and which can also be seen that in some swing states where the election to Senate takes place, Democrat candidates have bigger support than Harris, which seems that Democrats are less motivated to vote for her, which is very warning sign. And of course, these elections had been razor thin for a very long time, but honestly, 1 week ahead, there is very clear frontrunner, Donald Trump. When we look at the swing states, it seems that almost everything apart from the Rust Belt is already decided. It's going to be narrowed down to Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, and Harris cannot afford to lose even one of those states. So she's stepping on a very thin line. She's not doing well in Pennsylvania, campaign speaking. She was campaigning in Michigan with Liz Cheney, like the congresswoman, the daughter of Dick Cheney, from Republican side, to motivate a bit those Republicans who do not want to vote for Donald Trump. That was a part,
pardon me, but that seemed like it was a big part of her campaign as well. She kept bringing up during the debates, during the interviews, that she has the support of some of the Republicans, especially the ones that actually previously worked with Donald Trump, isn't it?
Yes, but it can be two-edged sword, because in the case of Liz Truss, she's clearly associated with her father, Dick Cheney. Liz Cheney is clearly associated with her father, Dick Cheney, who is associated with the war in Iraq. And there is a big outrage among the Arab population in the Detroit suburbs that they cut themselves from Harris, and they were supposed to vote for a Democrat candidate. So on one hand, yes, you are motivating those Republicans, but at the same time, you are losing Democrats. And if you are not motivating Detroit, you may lose Michigan. And apart from that, a lot of people, a lot of experts are saying that Harris is too much focused on criticizing Trump and threatening him, that she should focus more on positive agenda, on policies, on economy, where Trump is winning. Of course, yesterday there was this controversial issue at Madison Square Garden where this comedian said that Puerto Rico is a floating island of garbage. And we might be outraged, but is it the first time something like that happens around Trump? Has it ever had a big impact on him? Aren't his voters used to that? So I think it
seems a little bit, but it seems a little bit like a sort of a showmanship of sorts. He stepped into the world of politics. He showed something different, a different profile from every other politician, and I think in that sense we can agree that this is something that maybe is a part of the strategy of his. I don't know, maybe. What's your thought on that?
His strategy to be authentic, to say whatever he wants. You know, there are those campaign experts that are advising him, and then after a few days, Trump is saying something that was absolutely unexpected, and voters love it. But indeed, he's not that much welcomed by Americans, and I think we could see when when there was a change of candidate. First of all, Democrats did not estimate it properly how big issue for Americans was the age of Joe Biden. But then with some inertia, they didn't come up with any different candidate than Kamala Harris. And at the beginning, there was this big excitement because I think most of the people in America, they really don't want Donald Trump. And we're going to see that in the popular vote that Donald Trump is probably going to lose it. But in electoral college, he's going to win. But Democrats did not manage to consolidate this good momentum that they have had after swapping the candidate.
Could we just take a moment? Could you please explain the difference for those of our viewers who weren't looking into that? What's the difference between having the majority of votes and the electoral vote?
So in America, this is what was the most important is electoral college. So every state has fixed or actually changeable amount of votes. It's equalized to amount of parliamentarians they have, so the amount of congressmen that are delegated from the given state and the amount of senators. So for example, for Pennsylvania, it's 19, for Florida, it's 30. 4 years ago, it used to be different, but because of demographic change, those numbers are changing. Basically, the first candidate who will surpass 270 electoral votes will win the elections. And in 2016, Donald Trump lost popular vote. Like countrywide, he gathered 3 million less votes than Hillary Clinton, yet he won the elections because of the rules of the game. In 2020, Joe Biden had 9 million countrywide more votes. So when we see currently that on the countrywide polls, Kamala Harris is on edge with Donald Trump, like it's head-to-head, this is a good news for Donald Trump because Republicans may win less in the popular vote, but still secure the victory in the most important swing states and thus win the election.
We're days away. Is there a possibility that the vote is going to be moved by women? Could it be the case that it's the American women that are going to go to voting booths and they're going to finally decide the results? Are we going to see women voting for Kamala Harris? What are we to expect?
Few weeks ago, we had seen the big change gender-wise, that indeed more women wanted to vote for Kamala Harris than men for Donald Trump. However, recently those numbers started to be more narrowed. So it's for both cases around 55-54% to 46-45%. So it doesn't seem as a decisive factor. Probably some minorities might be decisive factors. Now we say that Puerto Rico, for example, in Pennsylvania alone, is a couple of 100,000 votes. Maybe they're going to be outraged by the recent Madison Square Garden rally of Donald Trump. But there is so many new factors in this election. So many, for the first time, women of color is running. For the first time, the president actually resigned during the campaign. For the first time, one of the candidates was there were assassination campaigns. There are so many factors that are hard to predict how they, in the end, going to be taken into account by American voters. That it's very hard to predict how those votes are going to be channeled. However, if you look at the odds of bet makers in the gambling industry, Donald Trump is fortunately and unfortunately clear frontrunner at the moment.
There's definitely been a lot of things, a lot of elements involved in this presidential campaign. In fact, I wanted to change the trajectory and come back to Europe from across the pond. If Donald Trump was to win another term in office, how likely do you think it is that he is going to follow through with withdrawing help for Ukraine and possibly maybe removing America from NATO alliance?
Well, the thing is that none of the experts is saying that Trump will move move out of NATO, and I also don't believe it. But you may never know how the course of the history will go, so we must take it into account that eventually there is going to be less and less America in Europe. From our European perspective, we should prolong that process as long as possible. But this is not something new. This is something like from pivot, when Barack Obama announced his pivot to Pacific, it was like in 2009, right? So it's been over 15 years, and it's a big wake-up call for Europe. And no matter if Trump or Harris is going to win, Europe must take more responsibility for its own security by itself. President Zelensky is suggesting in his peace plan that eventually in the peace times, Ukrainian soldiers that are experienced in the battlefield could substitute American soldiers in Germany, Poland, etc. But this is not really well welcomed by Europeans, which prefer to have American voters, because attacking them will mean attacking America than Ukrainian soldiers. So this is some kind of wing towards Donald Trump, but it's not welcomed by the Europeans at the moment. So
and we will be covering more on that subject. Unfortunately, our time here in the studio is sadly coming to an end, but thank you so much for joining me. Tomasz Obremski, resident fellow at the Casimir Pulaski Foundation.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure.
Thank you so much. And so this would be all here on World Talks, but please stay tuned because we have Salia Strzemska coming up with World News in just a moment.